Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It is championship week, and at one of the worst positions to try and figure out every single week, it is going to be absolutely crucial that we nail the tight end analysis this week. And I'll tell you what, I've been feeling really good about my tight end calls over the last few weeks, telling everyone to hold on to George Kittle. Things were going to get better, telling people to start Tyler Higbee the last couple of weeks. The Juwan Johnson run leading up to the playoffs, not great last week. We'll see if he can get back on track. I've been feeling really good about the tight end calls here as of recent, and let's see if we can knock it out of the park again in week 17 to help bring home some fantasy championships. Hit the like button for me, subscribe if you're new here to the channel, and let's jump right into the action. We're going to kick it off on Thursday Night Football, Dallas and Tennessee. And Dalton Schultz, he only has 8 points once over the course of his last 4 games, but this is a smash matchup. Tennessee allowing the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. He's still going to be kind of a mid to low end tight end one option for me, though. Yes, the opportunity is there. Yes, it's better than what we've seen recently, but they do utilize some other tight ends as well. We see CeeDee Lamb getting a majority of those catches, and when we get in the red zone, Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott are the go-to guys right now. So unfortunately, he's not seeing the touchdown upside that we saw earlier in the year. Dalton Schultz, a little bit of a risky option, but the matchup is just way too good to sit him unless you have a much safer option ahead of him. As far as Chigioco and Austin Hooper goes, Dallas allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points to tight end, and with Malik Willis being the starter, just like the rest of this offense, there's nothing to look at in the passing game. Arizona and Atlanta should be my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week, but it's not. Both of these teams are in the top 6 of most fantasy points allowed to the tight end position. But we've got 2 tight ends that aren't even worth playing. Maybe there's some touchdown dependency here. We've seen Pruitt score earlier this season in back-to-back games. Trey McBride, since Kyler Murray went down, he's seen about 4 to 5 targets per game, but there's really nothing to do here. In championship week, are you really going to risk it with Pruitt or McBride? Maybe in your DFS lineup, but not in your weekly lineup. Chicago at Detroit. The Lions' playoff hopes hang in the balance. A win is needed over the Bears. And the last time these two teams faced each other, Cole Kmet, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 74 yards, and 2 touchdowns scored. Detroit is still allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Cole Kmet will definitely be a guy that I go back to this week as a start. The upside will be there in this matchup. As far as the tight ends from the Detroit side, Zylstra's coming off a week in which he scored 3 touchdowns. Brock Wright 2 weeks ago had a huge touchdown to ice the victory over the New York Jets. But there's 3 players here, not just one. If it was one player like TJ Hawkinson, then maybe. But they rotate these guys. They utilize them in different fashions. Any single one of them could actually have a decent game on any given week as of right now. But we're not trying to pick who that is every week in our championship. Jacksonville and Houston, and Evan Ingram is the tight end one since week 13, and he's averaging 10 targets a game over that span. The dude is absolutely smashed. We had some inconsistencies to begin the year. We thought maybe that this was going to be a guy that saw a bounce back to the seasons of when he was with the New York Giants. And then all of a sudden he kind of came crashing back down to earth. And then to end the season, he is absolutely back. It's the roller coaster that is Evan Ingram, and one of the reasons why I love this guy, but it's okay. It's all right. I hate to love him, but I do anyway. Easy, a 100% start here for me. He's one of the main options in this offense right now. Jordan Akins for Houston. Last week, we kind of thought about it if Brandon Cooks didn't play, but Brandon Cooks ended up coming back, so we kind of jumped off the Jordan Akins bandwagon. I expect Cooks to be out there again this week, so no Jordan Akins for me. Denver, Kansas City, Nathaniel Hackett is out. What will this offense look like in week 17? Greg Dulcich found the end zone last week, but are you willing to risk it with him this week? Me personally, I am not. Since Courtland Sutton is back now and the main 2 targets of the wide receiver position are out there, Dulcich to me is just a very risky touchdown dependent play every single week. Something that isn't risky though is putting Travis Kelce in your lineup every single week. This week for me, Great matchup. The volume is there. Everything is there for a legit top tier tight end one performance. If you have Travis Kelce, I think he's going to lead you to a championship. Miami and New England, and we can't really even make a call on Mike Gesicki other than we know Tua may not even play this week. He's back in the concussion protocol for the third time this season. Will he even be out there to face New England this week? If he is, then we know Mike Gesicki isn't even going to be worth a look because Tua doesn't look his way ever. If it's not Tua, then maybe we talk about it a little bit later on in the week. But for me personally, I probably skip on him and leave him as a sit no matter what. For Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, they actually have a pretty good matchup. Miami allows the fourth most fantasy points to tight ends, but we don't see them utilized on a weekly basis. So again, risking them at this point of the season just isn't in the cards for me. Not much to see in the Indianapolis and Giants matchup here. The Giants offense, yes, Daniel Bellinger, before he ended up getting hurt, he was starting to maybe pick up a little bit, but since he came back, he's seeing a few targets here and there, but nothing with fantasy viable volume to really throw into our lineup. On the other side with the Colts, their offense is a mess right now. I don't know why we would want to start anybody on the Colts if your name isn't Michael Pittman, but with that being said, everybody in this matchup is a sit for me. New Orleans, Philadelphia, and Philadelphia allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. New Orleans allows the fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. We've got Juwan Johnson, who went on an incredible 7-touchdown streak over 7 weeks. We've got Dallas Goedert, who's been missing, but finally has gotten back after his injury and has been fantasy viable for almost the entire season. What are we going to see in this matchup? A lot of risk for me. Juwan Johnson going up against this tougher matchup is going to be very touchdown dependent, but it's going to depend on if New Orleans can even get to the red zone enough to give him the targets. That's where he makes his money. If they find the red zone, Juwan Johnson is a guy that absolutely could score every single time. For Dallas Goedert, I mean, we still don't even know who's going to be at the quarterback position. Jalen Hurts is trying to get back this week. Will it be Gardner Minshew again? It is a tougher matchup. You've got Devontae Smith. You've got A.J. Brown. For me, Dallas Goedert isn't necessarily touchdown dependent. For me, he's kind of big play dependent. If we can get him 5 to 6 targets and the guy can average over 15 yards a catch, then at that point we put ourselves in a position to have a really nice fantasy day. So is the opportunity there? Absolutely. Am I sitting him? Absolutely not, unless you have like a Travis Kelce. Everybody is a risk right now, but Dallas Goedert for me has got to have the big plays to return the value. Carolina, Tampa Bay, nothing to see here. I mean, I could go into an entire spiel for both of these offenses for you. Carolina has 2 tight ends that they don't really utilize. Tampa Bay has 2 tight ends that they don't really utilize. Now, Otton did have 7 targets last week, but he hasn't really done anything fantasy-wise since Cameron Brate came back. In this matchup, maybe Otton, finds a couple of red zone targets. But with the way Tampa Bay has played, how quickly do they even get there and how many trips do they have? Cleveland and Washington is allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends, but I'm still going to throw David Njoku out there. Better weather this week, and I say that just absolutely as excited as could be. Better weather this week, a red zone threat, the number 1 red zone threat on this team for Deshaun Watson. If they can get down inside the 20, David Njoku becomes a guy who is going to get plenty of looks, but we got to get down there. And how do we do that against a defense that is actually playing very well? That's going to be a question that the Cleveland Browns need to answer. And for Logan Thomas, Cleveland allows the 8th fewest fantasy points to game, and Thomas is coming off a game in which he had 8 targets and caught 6 of those. But it's really hard to trust him in a tougher matchup when you've got Terry McLaurin, when you've got Jahan Dotson. Curtis Samuel even scored last week. For me, Logan Thomas is out in the playoffs. San Francisco, Las Vegas is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Head on over to manscaped.com. Use code word headliners. You're going to get 20% off at your checkout, and you're going to get free shipping. Make sure you utilize that code when you go over there and you do some shopping. But for me, this is the matchup of the week with Kittle and Waller, 2 top tight end production assets going up against each other. George Kittle over the last 2 weeks is the tight end 1 by over 15 points. He has absolutely dominated the last couple of weeks. For those of you that have kept the faith of George Kittle like I have, he's absolutely smashing, and it all kind of went down with that Deebo Samuel injury. When that happened, we talked about what is going to happen, who's going to fluctuate, who's going to be the guys, and at that time I said, I think George Kittle's going to be the one to pick up the slack, and we have absolutely seen it. The guy has dominated his performances over the last 2 weeks, and now he gets a really, really good matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. For Darren Waller, this is a guy that led the team in receptions last week, and this is going to be a tough matchup. San Francisco is a tough team, but what comes with facing that tough team is getting rid of the ball quickly, getting it out of your hands, getting it to your playmakers. That's going to be Darren Waller, and that's why I feel like he's going to see more than enough targets this week to be fantasy viable. The Jets and the Seahawks, and Tyler Conklin has a smash matchup going up against the #1 team in fantasy points allowed to the opposing tight ends. Listen, for the New York Jets, we know Mike White is going to be the starting quarterback, something that's been, up in the air the last couple of weeks. Who's starting? Who isn't? Can White make it back? Things of that nature. If Mike White is playing, Tyler Conklin is going to be a start for me in a really, really good matchup. Now, Mike White, he is a guy that has looked towards Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, and even Elijah Moore a little bit more. But my hope is that they realize how good of an asset Conklin could be in this matchup, and they get him into the end zone. For Noah Fant and Will Dissly, Fant for me could move back to being a start, but a lot of it is going to depend on Tyler Lockett and Marquise Goodwin and whether or not they can play this week. Minnesota in Green Bay, and for Minnesota and Green Bay, TJ Hockenson coming off a legendary performance for fantasy owners last week, and even though this is a tougher matchup for him, he is clearly the #2 target in this offense. Give me some more TJ Hockenson this week. Maybe the ceiling isn't as high as we saw last week, but in a back and forth matchup, and a lot of fantasy implications and a lot of real world implications, playoff matchups on the line, first round buys potentially on the line, absolutely an offensive slaughterhouse between these two teams. A lot of back and forth, I feel like. And for Green Bay, Robert Tonyan is irrelevant, doesn't matter. The Los Angeles Rams, the Los Angeles Chargers, Tyler Higbee, 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks. Really feeling good with Baker Mayfield, and I'm going to put him down to potentially find the end zone and be at least fantasy relevant this week as well. Lots of touchdown potential. He's a start for me again. Gerald Everett is not a start, coming off a week in which he saw zero targets, and one of the reasons why, they're healthy. Palmer, Williams, Allen, everybody's healthy right now. Donald Parham is back. And because of that, Gerald Everett and throw in Austin Eckler just isn't seeing any targets. Pittsburgh and Baltimore, Freiermuth is an absolute start. He led the team in targets again last week, and he's clearly the #1 target of Kenny Pickett when he plays. Give me Pat Freiermuth in this matchup against Baltimore. And then for Mark Andrews, for fantasy owners, it has been rougher to start Mark Andrews than that ball sack that hasn't been manscaped in months. How can you even put the guy in your lineup right now? I know you're asking yourself that every single week, which is crazy because with Tyler Huntley last year, he was the tight end 1 the entire time. No idea why they haven't been able to take it and carry it over this season, but they haven't. And because of that, he is still going to be a start for me. But if you own him and you've got a lot of the other guys that are listed in this video, look into the rankings video on Thursday because they're probably going to be over Andrews this week again. Monday Night Football might bring one of the most anticipated matchups of the season with the Bills and the Bengals. Knox is on a strong run right now, and the Cincinnati Bengals are actually pretty darn good against the pass on the wide receivers. For the tight ends, though, they do seem to allow a little bit more volume headed their way. So for me, for Cincinnati this week and for the Bills, I'm going to start Dawson Knox, but I'm going to sit Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst, again, still dealing with that injury from a couple of weeks ago, and Buffalo allows the second fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Give me some Dawson Knox this week in this matchup. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it. We are done with our tight end analysis this week. Hit that like button for me on the way out if If you're new here and somehow you're just finding us at the end of the season, welcome in, hit the subscribe button and stick around. And for those of you that are playing in a fantasy championship this week, good luck. For those of you watching, even if you might not be playing, keep watching all off season long. I'm gonna get out of here. Peace out and stay safe and stay healthy, Headliner Nation. I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.